So I did something that one of you asked for. I mapped out every run, flow, and body of water in Elden Ring to determine how many true rivers exist in this game and where each one comes from. But why? Because when you think of Elden Ring, nobody thinks of water. You can't even swim! So my job as your virtual tour guide that you never asked for is to convince you for the next 15 minutes that these hydrological occurrences in Elden Ring can happen in our real world. Now, before I start, it's important to note that there really aren't that many rivers in this game, but more bodies of static water that happen to have assumed creation points. So with that, let's take a dip. Our first location is Lake Agheel in Limgrave. Well, it's connected to a valley and water leading out of here. Let's go follow it. So if we start in the middle of Lake Agheel and travel northward, we can see where the origins of this source of water comes from. Along our path, we actually meet a dead end, and the continuation of this river is a hop, skip, and a jump to the river's origins where it leads to the land between's ocean. My personal prediction is that the water levels in this world were once much higher, and that would explain how a river could flow all the way throughout this valley, create a cascading waterfall which would later flow into Lake Agheel. It kind of makes sense, and actually if you look at this valley in Caelid, it does seem to be a dried up river as well. Who's to say? Oh, and Caelid actually has no water in its entire area. Sorry to disappoint. But if we continue from where we were in Limgrave and head east, we'll encounter Summon Water Village. And I found this to be one of the more interesting points of created water in the entire game, because what you'll see doesn't happen anywhere else in Elden Ring. So we're pitter-pattering around these undead ruins, and you're probably thinking, this really isn't a river at all. And you're very correct. This is merely a collection of water, but it's a perfect point of access for rainwater to soak into its permeable soil. But why does that matter? Well, if you look to the south, we'll see this segment of water off the cliffside of this village. And how did this form? Well, with careful parkouring, we can get a closer look. This little spout is what's producing this big pond or small lake below. Really a glass half full situation. Actually, you'll find many tiny ponds, not only in Limgrave, but all throughout the world that are birthed on the side of a cliff or a big hill just like this one. It's extremely common. But let's get back to this spout of water. Is this something that you could find in the real world, where water from above shoots out the side of a cliff? Well, yes. Where rainwater flows into the ground, it produces an aquifer. As more water flows in, there's a buildup in pressure, and that water seeks out the lowest path of resistance, in turn creating this lovely spout. This instance of water flowing out of a cliff is also known as a spring. And it's all starting to make sense. Every zone has something impressive going on, and Liurnia's massive lake, and where it comes from, is no different. Liurnia Lake is the largest body of water in Elden Ring, besides the ocean of course, but also the square mileage compared to the rest of the regions is insane. Limgrave? Not a chance. Weeping Peninsula? No shot. Caelid, put the fries in the bag, buddy. And Altus and Mountaintops are the same result. It's pretty extraordinary. But wait till you see how this puppy's produced. So if we follow the flow northward, it abruptly narrows into this valley where we're met with many giant pus sacks. But remember, beauty is right around the corner from trash. And I'm being serious, because you'll find this massive waterfall at the rune-strewn aqueduct. As a refresher, an aqueduct is a system of tunnels, canals, and channels able to flow water from one point to a main distribution point. In this case, water from the bottom of Mount Gelmir, or Altus Plateau, is transported downwards to constantly replenish Liurnia Lake. And we see a lot of these pipes and systems at work when you look around the magma worm Makar's boss arena. It's really such an impressive feature that the devs didn't need to add. They could have easily just put a hole in the wall and said fuck it, but they really crafted this multi-layer system to explain Liurnia Lake's creation. Look at that! Short and sweet. But now we go from a place of high temperature to the barren wasteland of snow and freezing temperatures, the mountaintops of the giants. It wasn't always like this though. This place used to be flourishing with beautiful water, and it originally started near the peak at the mountaintops frozen lake. And just like every waterway or river flow, gravity pulls them downwards. Since we're back to looking at a river and not just a massive body of water, this river in particular flowed northward. Some of you were saying, so? Who cares? But for many of us in the US and maybe other parts of the world, we were taught in grade school that rivers that flowed northward were extremely rare, and that most rivers always flow south. For example, we learned that the Nile River is the longest river in the world, but it was also said to be one of the only north-flowing rivers. At least, that's what I thought when I was 10. Well, bad education systems lose again because this is a myth. There are tons of rivers around the world, but also many located in the US that flow from south to north. How is this a myth? Because rivers flow in the direction of gravity. It's kind of an obvious answer. But when you're 10 and high off eating macaroni and glue, you'll believe just about anything. Anyways, this frozen river flows north and goes all the way off the side of this cliff and empties into the Grand Ocean. Is it spectacular? That gigantic frozen waterfall sure is. And it looks like we have an admirer. And you would think that the mountaintops would be a main source of water for the rest of the lands between, but it's completely sectioned off from the rest of the regions, and the snowmelt just rolls right off into the Grand Ocean. Now that we've shown all there is above ground, let's dive down into the Underdarks, where we'll start to uncover what exactly is the pure water source generating down here. And this was actually the closest we'll see to a proper river, and for me personally, it was the most engaging areas to research. I say research like I'm a scientist, when really I'm just sloshing around a video game. Okay, first let's travel to Siofa River, where we're met with a wide area of static water. We don't care about that, but it's important to note the dumping point of the water we'll soon be following. Travel up each waterfall until we find the true source of distribution coming from the Duo Gargoyle Arena. But it doesn't stop there, because we find ourselves at the foot of another waterfall, the Great Basin Waterfall. We'll hunker down in the coffin and let Mikola take the wheel, to arrive in the water above at the deep depths. A huge zone filled with milky or purple liquids, and we're pretty much underneath the Erd Tree and seeing the various underground waters that keeps this baby so damn big. But you realize this is the main point of distribution for both Siofa River and the Ainsel River, passing to two separate water systems, one waterfall to the south and the other flowing to the west. We haven't gotten a good look at the Ainsel River, so let's take another plunge down yet another massive waterfall. Please tell me someone's counting the waterfalls you're seeing. There must be like 30 waterfalls of all sizes in this game. Anyways, we crack open our coffin like it's a cold one, and just like Siofa River, Ainsel River has a directional current, and I couldn't be happier. Just to give a real-world perspective, these underground rivers are also known as subterranean rivers. Basically a river that flows beneath the ground and usually found throughout cave systems. But from the start of Ainsel River, we make our way down and are met with an immediate split. If you follow the left, you're led to this massive skeleton sitting upon a throne with waterfalls flowing from all around us. Well, if we choose the right split, we find ourselves in the lower parts of Noxtella. And you can see the source of those waterfalls that we just saw were actually from up here. And if we keep going, we can see behind the massive skeleton where the water from the left meets up with the flow of the water that split to the right. In short, they converge and settles at this final pool at the foot of this dam. This is where we're met with game logic, because really this water should settle here or at least keep going in the direction away from the waterfall. But it doesn't. It looks like water is somehow being generated or bouncing off of the dam and moving towards the waterfall that we were just at. And there are instances in the real world where a shelf of water above falls into a river that just so happens to be flowing downhill parallel or underneath those spill rocks. Hope you enjoyed the drawing. But after careful investigation of literally just walking back and forth, the elevation is slightly higher as we move towards the waterfall, making this an impossible occurrence. And I love it all the same. But you know what I don't love that happens to also be down here and beyond that dam? The Lake of Rot. But before we talk about poisonous lakes, let's take a peek at the Shadow Realm where two girthy rivers stand strong. Well, the ending point of these two rivers, Scorpion River and Shadowkeep's River, flows downward into the lowest elevated land of the Abyssal Forest. That's actually why there's so much water collection down here. It's because of these two rivers on top of the forest elevation level. One actually flowing behind Midra's castle, and no, I couldn't find a single entry, and the other flowing to a northern point of this same forest. So first let's take Torrent and check out Scorpion River. As you can see, Scorpion River is by far the longest river in Elden Ring's entirety, spanning across almost all of the Shadow Realm and eventually is produced by nothing. It just starts at the foot of these catacombs and continues forth. Things like this isn't so much of a gotcha moment because I can imagine a dev watching this and thinking, yeah, you got me. And it's interesting since this isn't really a generating point, it's more of a static starting line. And it's confusing considering how massive this riverway is. You would think this would have a monumental beginning. Unless I lied. Because if you venture forth to the Rao ancient ruins, you'll find a number of flowing waterfalls. And where do these continue into? Scorpion River. Now this is exciting. And if we look at the eastern and western lands, you'll see that both sources of water starts off as a pool. The western one clearly being static and having no flowing properties, but the eastern one has motion and moves toward the proper direction in which it falls into the river below. It truly shows the verticality of this game, especially in the Shadow Realm, and even though it's still the answer that we had at the foot of the catacombs, I was just more excited to see a river that had directional movement. You hear that? That's what good water sounds like. And up here is where this entire river is produced. But how is Shadowkeep's river produced? Well, most likely it's by Shadowkeep's extensive water and sewer system. But also we did empty the moat that was contained here, and our actions of releasing all of that water could have contributed to this river's flow. And just like all of the above ground rivers in the game, the water is still static and only shows motion when tumbling over a waterfall. Now I know that I presented you with a ton of information, but stay with me. If you made it this far, consider subscribing, because you made it to the bonus level of this video, where we're just going to be talking about poisonous lakes in the real world, and how they kinda connect to poisonous lakes in Elden Ring. Generally, the Witchbane ruins and Castle Morn's poisonous lake are overlooked by many, but I wanted to touch on them even if briefly because I think they're a foreshadow of what's to come later on in your journey to becoming Elden Lord. This game doesn't just have these two poisonous lakes, but also the massive one surrounding the Shaded Castle, the rotted swamp of Aeonia and Caelid, and the dreaded Lake of Rot in the Underdark. These are awful places to be, and all of them make me relive the many hours of deaths and runbacks I experienced when I first encountered Blighttown in the original Dark Souls. So I wanted to see if there were any real-world instances of bodies of water that are just straight deadly, and once again, I was extremely surprised at what I found. There's the Boiling Lake located in Dominica. You can probably guess the dangers there. This lake reaches 195 degrees Fahrenheit due to the volcanic emissions down below. Another is known as Kawah Ijen, found in the volcanic mountains of Indonesia. Watch your step, because this cratered lake is equivalent to battery acid in that its pH levels are recorded to be 0.13. Lastly, we have Lake Nitrine, settled in Tanzania. Opposite of Kawah Ijen, this lake's pH levels can reach 12, that of ammonia, an inactive volcano area, but the rich minerals and hardened bedrock fill this lake with high salinity and alkaline levels. So high that the water can calcify small animals, and if drank by humans can cause sickness and burns. So you could say these poisonous and deadly lakes in the real world are very similar to that of Elden Ring's, with maybe a little less rot. And that concludes our tour today. Let's do a little recap. I use words like run, flow, stream to describe rivers in this game, when really there's only one water source that truly resembles an actual river. But which one? Well, let's see. The two water sources in Limgrave, no directional flow, not rivers. Liurnia Lake? Well, it's a lake that's been created by an aqueduct, no directional flow, not a river. The Mountaintops frozen river? Technically a river, not flowing though, no directional movement, not a river. All the ponds and lakes we talked about? Not rivers. The two rivers in the DLC? Well, Scorpion River did have directional movement at the beginning, but most of it is all static bodies of water. Surely the deep depths, right? Not a river. Which leaves Siofra River and the Ainsel River as the only resemblances to real-world rivers in Elden Ring, both having directional movement and leading to a larger body of water at a lower elevation. Is this an upsetting conclusion? Not really, because every source of water throughout this game has something unique about it. And at the end of the day, it's a game made for our enjoyment and doesn't need to have real-world explanations. Shout out to this viewer, Apollo is not a shirt, for presenting this idea to me. It allowed me to discover an amazing creator in AnyAustin, a YouTuber who's made some of the most creative and interesting videos on rivers, but also on this platform. So hopefully I was able to give even 10% of the hydrological justice that he gives in his videos. And check out his channel. And for now, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.